Begin the current Daf Masechtas Bava Metzia Daf Samachas. Begin 4 lines down from the top of the Amud, where the Gemara continues the conversation for the previous Daf regarding the halacha of mashkanta, which came up in the Gemara's discussion on the previous Daf, obviously relating to the halachas as it applies to that of ribis. We spoke about asur de mesalki, asur de loy mesalki, where when a person gives security, there are places where he could pay up early and get his security back. Some places he can't. The Gemara continues on these halachas relating to mashkin. Ashir goes about the Kazakh and Cheskot, turn to Daf Yomi, turn to today's Daf, throughout the entire world. So discussing today's Daf are mashkanta, which is when someone takes a loan, he gives security, and that's a question, as we said, regarding certain places, and when could he go ahead and be misalik the lender to get back his security. We also discusses regarding certain transactions that may involve interest, shtar mechazanoi, as we'll see the documents from Mechuzah and Chachire Narshoi, from the place Narshoi, their leases may involve interest. Iska is a very popular topic in this parak of Izu Neshech in business world, which is basically means a business deal, but it's referring to specifically when there's someone who has merchandise and he gives it to someone else to do the shvitz, to do the work, and they share the profits. The problem with that is that it's essentially that it's 50-50. And that means to say that 50% belongs to the owner and 50% belongs to the worker. The 50% that belongs to the worker is a loan, and the problem is that he's doing work for the owner's half, and that work is considered interest on that loan, and hence that has to be offset so that it's not considered as prohibited interest. So we begin the current Daf Samachas, 4 lines down at the top of the Amud, Amr Ravashi. So he says that Amrli Sabi de Masa Machasya, the elders of the place called Masa Machasya, told me the following halacha, that Stam Mashkanta. So again, a mashkanta is a property pledge as a security for a loan. That in general, the minimum of a security is shata is for 1 year. Says for what halachic relevancy is this being said for? The i'achala shata is telling you that if the lender has consumed from the security, he had used the field which he's holding on to security for a year, then the borrower could go ahead and remove him, meaning by paying up the debt and getting back his security. If not, he can't remove him yet the entire year, as Rashi points out, even in Ba'asr de Mesalki, even in places where, if, let's say, the loan was for a period of 10 years, and the borrower wants to pay up early and get his security back, even according to those places, you would have to first have a minimum of a year, and only then can you redeem it. Another teaching from V'amar Ravashi, from Amru Lisabi de Masa de Mechasya. Again, another teaching from Ravashi, what the elders of Masa Mechasya told them on this topic, my mashkanta. What is the word mashkanta, the etymology of that word? It's the shchuna gabe. It's the word shin chaf nun over there, is the shirish, is that it's a neighbor to him, meaning there's no neighbor closer than the lender to the security, to the pledge. So Gemara says, what does that mean? What's the relevancy of that? That like as if the security is a shchuna, is a shachin to the lender. Says the Gemara, Ladina de Bava Metzia. It's for the halachas of the neighbor, which is that if, let's say, this borrower is coming to sell that property, so you don't have, for the laws of Bar Metzia, a better neighbor to buy it. The halach is that the neighbors have first rights to buy the property. We're saying, although this lender might live a few blocks away, but since he is the one who has it as security right now, that's what mashkanta is like a shachin. It's like he's the neighbor because he's the most invested in it, and therefore he would have first rights to buy this property. Continuing on these halachas, Amar Rava says, less halachas of the halachas does not follow loy ketarshi papanoi, which we discussed on Daf Samachei, that Rav Papa was a beer brewer, and he would sell the beer in the cheaper season of Tishrei, but he would charge the prices of 6 months later of the higher price of Nisan, but he would wait. He said, you guys don't have to pay till Nisan. So he said, that was allowed to be done, That says the Gemara, no, the halacha is not like that. That's a problem of ribbis. And neither is the halacha like the way the documents are written in mechuzah. And neither is the halacha like the leases narshay. And the Gemara explains all these three, what are the problems with them. So ketarshi papanoi, that means ketarshi de papa. As we said in the Samachay, that he was saying, he said, look, my beard doesn't get ruined. I don't have to sell to them right now. I could wait till Nisan and charge the high prices. So the halacha does not follow like our papa, as the Gemara said over there at that point. Because why going after you? Go after them. For them, if they had money, they would be able to buy for the cheaper price right now. They don't have, so they have to buy from you on credit for the more expensive price of later on. Well, that's a problem about ribbis. So therefore, the halacha does not follow the way Rav Papa had done by charging them the higher price. The second halacha, shtar mechazenoi, which the people from Mechuzah, their documents had the following problem. Because what would they do? They, when people would purchase merchandise, so they would give it to merchants to sell it for them to get half the profits. And they would evaluate how much are the likely profits, and they would then put half of those profits with the principal to say that you, the merchant, have to give me back this amount. Because obviously the principal is the owner's principal. It's just the profits that they're sharing. So in the profit share, meaning not only did he put in the document that you owe me the principal, but that you owe me also, as if it was the principal, half of the profits, and because and they would write in the document that this guy owes this guy this and this amount for that time, and that was like, meaning like as if it's regarding what's going to come, as if it's already part of the principal. On that, the problem is why it's usher, because in a way it's like a sale on the future wages. That's what they thought, that would be permitted. That it's like a sale. But on that, it's usher, says the Gemara, because who says that there will be additional profit? Maybe there's not. And if that's the case, so then it's like ribbis, because that means to say whatever's more than the principal is being given as part of back when you're paying back the loan. You're charging more for that half that he's getting. Therefore, that's going to be, you gave him a certain amount of money, he's giving you back more. That's a violation of ribbis. Now, however, Amalei Marbar Meimel Ravashi, he said, but Abba Abed Hachi, my father, who is from the Mechazanai, I mean, he did like this. But I'll tell you why he avoided the problem that you just said. When they would come in front of him and they would tell him that, sorry, boss, we didn't make the money that we thought that we were projected to make, he wouldn't take. Mehemaluhu, he would trust them. Oh, okay. So that's not a problem about ribbis. The whole concern with the shtar mechazanoi was that if they don't end up making that money, so and now he's paying him back more than what he got, so that's the problem about ribbis. On earth says no, he wouldn't take it then. So Malay. So however, Rav Ashi said back to Marbar Meimer, he says well, that's very good when your father is still alive at the time of the payment. Well, he's a pious person and he trusted them. And you're right, then he wouldn't take more than what was given. But what would be Ishachiv if he dies with Nafal, and then the document falls in front of the orphans? They're not going to trust. They're going to say, look, the document says that you owe 150 for this date. What would be then in that situation? You're going to run into the problem about ribbis. Says the Gemara, this was like the pasuk says in Kehelis, Keshkogo sheyotzes melifnei hashalat, similar to a ruler, that if he says out of his mouth erroneously a decree, he can't take it back anymore. And since Rav Ashi in his words said, what will be when your father would pass away? So Meimer passed away because of the words that he said. But Al Kaponim, this is a problem because even though his father would say that if you didn't make the profits, it's okay, you don't have to. But the problem is what would be regarding the orphans that they're not going to trust, and then you're going to violate the laws of ribbis. Now, chachire, which chakiris is a certain type of a lease, which when someone has someone else's field, and he says, I'll pay you 10 kor of produce per year. Whether the field produces a lot or little, I'll always give you the set amount of produce. So that type of lease agreement of Narshai, of the people of Narsha, the Kasvi Hachi, they would write like this. Mishkin le Palanya Are, this guy, the borrower, pledges this property, Leplanya, to this person, meaning the lender, where people, Balabatim, would lend money to poor people on the pledges of their fields. And then then they would go back and then lease them to the borrower for a certain amount of kur of produce for the year. That's what they used to do in Arshai. The problem with this is Amos Kana. When exactly did the lender acquire this field, the Akniye Nahale, that then they should then transfer it back to the owner through the medium of chakiris? Meaning it comes out that really he's taking ribis kitsutza like an upfront ribis, because the lender's not putting any effort into it. And even if it doesn't produce, he's not losing out from the chakiros, from the agreed upon amount per year. So again, he lent him $100 and he's getting back all that extra that he's charging him per month for the field, which is not really, I mean, if it was a third party, so yeah, he could do that because it pledged him. The problem is here, he never ever took it away from the borrower, and the borrower is paying him per month. It definitely has the appearance of ribis. But says the Gemara, that was then. But currently the Kasvi Hachi that they write like this in the document, they write, Kanina Minei, me the lender, I acquired this field as a pledge from the borrower. Vishahino kamo idane, this is the critical words. And I held on to this in the hand of the lender, and he went and he used the field and ate with it in what's called nachyas, in a way that that takes away from the debt that's owed. And then and then he went and he leased it back from me. Oh, kadesh like tinel delis, but they love that we shouldn't close the doors in front of a borrower, shopper dummy. Okay, that's enough. That's good enough, because since it was by him and he ate from it for 3 years, so what's the difference if he's using it? What's the difference if he leases it out? That's going to be okay, because then it doesn't have any more the appearance of like just he's paying him interest on the original loan. No, it's that it's the pledge field that he goes, now he's leasing it to someone else. It could be the original guy himself also. That's okay. Which the Gemara says, no, it's not true. It's not true. That even if he had held on to it, the lender is also forbidden, because it's full-fledged ribis. Because the reason why it's full-fledged ribis is because there's no doubt over here. There's halacha that we'll see later on the next daf, that when he himself is using the pledge field, yes, sometimes it'll produce, sometimes it won't. So therefore, since it's not definite, that's not considered like a ribis ketsutza. But over here, where he's getting the chakiris every month, no matter what's going on, so that definitely has more of an element of ribis, which Rashi has ribis gemurihi, and therefore that would be forbidden to go ahead and do like they did in Narshai and in Narsha, to go ahead and lease it back, the pledge to the guy, to the borrower himself, that this would be forbidden. These are the 3 things that the Gemara says the halacha is not like them, not like the way Rav Papa did, the Tarsha, because that's ribis, not like the Shtar Mechaznoi, where they would put into the principal the projected amount that they're going to make, because that's also ribis, and not like the leases of Narsha, because again, that's also a problem about ribis, because it doesn't have the appearance of like as if he's leasing out the pledged field back to the borrower. It just looks like he's paying him more for what he lent him. We continue the halacha, the next Mishnah, continue with the halacha of iska, which is, like we said, in the business world, is a very big word. As we know, the word heter iska, this is something that comes up oftentimes in doing business. Says the Mishnah, a homeowner cannot tell a storekeeper, he says, look, the produce that I have would be sold in the marketplace right now for 4 sa, you would get a sela. You, That's if I sold it in one shot now in the marketplace. You could sell it in your store, pruta, a little bit at a time. We know retail obviously is always charging a little bit more than wholesale. If you do that, you'll gain a saw from the selling it like that. So here, take the peiros, go sell it in your store constantly, lemachtzis schar, and the profits will split. Now, the reason why you can't do this is because the Gemara tells us later on the Kovdalim Abayz, what is iska? Iska is essentially half loan and half deposit. Why? Because in general, when someone accepts merchandise to split the profits, so he accepts upon himself responsibility for half of the principal. If whatever happens, of any type of extenuating circumstance happens, the produce gets ruined or the price goes down, because that's the half that he's taking responsible for. The owner's half, he gets other half. That's his. So that's not accepting responsibility. That's his own. But for the owner's half, he's accepting responsibility for. So that half, since he's chayv and einzin, essentially that's a loan by him. That's what a loan is. Loan is you got to give back what you got. Versus Shimer is not chayv and einzin, even if he's getting paid, whatever. Because since it's evaluated by him regarding the money, like how much the market is in the market values in the market. So the halacha is that he's getting half the profits. Comes out, and this is the critical point, that he's misasik. That's what the iska is over here. He's engaged in the half of the homeowner, which is a deposit by him, meaning he's lent half the money, which goes to him, and other half is like a deposit from the homeowner, and he's getting the schar of waiting to pay back the loan money. And the work that he's doing is essentially like ribis, because that's, you're doing work. Work is obviously a service. That work that he's doing is in behalf of the homeowner, meaning of the guy who owns the produce, which is a pakadin by him, that he's watching. He's doing work for that. That's like payment for the loan half that he's getting, which that half is his that he has to pay back.
Why aren't these just simply understood concepts of mekach and emkar? Why is it called a ribbis?
It's ribbis.
This is the way a homeowner signs produce to a store.
Right. And then there's a problem about ribbis over here, because it's you're doing a service for the fact that you're getting half of this as a loan. In other words, we should do half the work and you should do half the work. But no, I'm the guy who's taking the merchandise. Half of it you're lending to me, which I'm going to get the profits of that. Half of it is a pakadin, which is your profits. Now, I'm doing all the work, but I'm the storekeeper. The half of yours that I'm working for is a service. You're getting back a service from me. It's worth money. Now, whether that's my intention or not, that is giving you back more than the loan that you gave me. Because again, we'll see this later on, but half of it is like a loan, because that's I'm getting those profits, and half of it is a deposit, which I'm just watching for you. And we're going to get 50-50, but I'm doing a service for you. That's ribbis on the loan that you're giving me. So therefore, you can't give the storekeeper to say, okay, we'll split this 50-50. And all these halachas are the similar theme, says the Mishnah. Neither can you give money, likich ben peiros, to buy produce, lamechtzes schar, you can't invest money with a merchant for the peiros, for half, to split the profits. Elam kain, and this is what's needed to, like we said, to offset this service. If you give the wages of the work that the worker is doing for you, of the half that's the pakadin, kapaya like a worker. Meaning, half the work he's obviously doing for himself. That's the loan part. That's his own work. The other half of his work, he has to be paid back like a worker because he's doing that for me, that service. So similarly, says the Mishnah, one cannot set down a a hen for half, meaning to put eggs for money to the owner of the chicken, to have them sit to hatch the chicks, lemechza for half of the wages, meaning what the chicks are worth more than the value of the eggs, because that's what the profit's going to be. You're giving eggs to an owner of a chicken to hatch your eggs. This is problematic. Why? Because the same idea. Since this one who is the owner of the chicken is accepting responsibility for half of the value of the eggs if they get ruined or if they died, because that's his half, that's like a half of, that's a milva, because it's like it's evaluated right now with the monetary value as it is right now. That money is like a loan. So you have all responsibility because you're getting that half of the profits. Automatically, half is like, okay, you're responsible. Comes out that this that he's hatching, the other guy's half, is in the is a payment or reward for the fact of that you're waiting to collect the money back from him, which is his half, which is the loan part. Again, it's a complex way of explaining, but just we have to end up at the bottom, which is to show that this is a halva. That's essentially the idea. If you look at all these Rashis, that's the concept we're trying to get to. This is why they're problematic, because what type of loan is? Well, where do you see a loan over here? We're just doing business together. No, if you understand the concept of what the iska is, it is a loan, because why you chayv for 50%? Then no matter what happens, you got to give it back, because you're getting half of the profits. Half of it is like yours and half of it is like mine. That's why we're splitting 50-50. So okay, that means 50% is a loan, because that's what a loan is. If you were a shiur, you wouldn't be chayv 19. The shiur sachar, it's yours. Okay, it's a loan. It's a loan. But the other 50% is mine. That's a deposit. You're watching for me. Okay, so that 50%, that's a loan, and you're getting the 50% profit of that, and I'm getting 50% profit, but you're doing work also. That work is a service. That's ribbis. That's a problem. So too, the ein shaman agolim b'siyachim. You cannot assess the calves and the colts, the young animals, that to say, okay, right now they're worth this and this amount. I want you to accept upon yourself, you, Mr. Farmer, to bring them up for a period of 2 years, lemechza, and then we'll split the profits and also half of the loss if they die. No, you can't do that. Unless you give the worker the wages for his work and for the food that he's spending on the chicks and on the calves for the half that is the owner's part. Again, because that has to offset the service that he's providing, or else that service is ribbis. Avul but, says the Mishnah, but he could accept and make an agreement of calves and the colts for half, meaning, as Rashi explains, he could accept these small animals if there is no assessment, meaning if they die, the work is not going to pay anything. If they survive, then he will split the profits in half. Then that's not a milva. The whole idea how this became a milva in the first place that makes it Brahma Ribbis is because you have the achrayas of the nechasim. Okay, so then we consider as alva. If he's not taking any responsibility, okay, we're not assessing, we're seeing the profits. We'll split. Okay, fine. So then that's okay. There's no loan over here, and hence then you'd be able to do this 50-50 without paying him for his service. Now, parenthetical, just because we're talking about this case of growing the animals and splitting the profits of now that it became bigger and stronger, Magav Naisan, the halacha is that the agreement lasts to grow the cattle at shiur mishaloshin, when they're going to be a third of their growth, a third of what an ox is, a third of a horse, and then they split it. And the chamor, a donkey, he has to bring up achte to enes, until it could carry its load. That, says Rashi, was their minig, was to have it grow that amount before they would split it. And then you could split the profits, but not before that.
And the same principles could apply to other cases as well.
Which principles?
In other words, that if he's paying the storekeeper for the services,
Yeah, that's exactly what the Mishnah said. That meaning, if you pay for the services, then places wonders why we switch it in the middle from poil bottle to the halacha of nisan leschara al. But yeah, as long as you're paying him for the service, you're offsetting that problem about ribbis. Now, the Gemara, just to clarify as a point, we said the words we said were Tana. We said that okay, you got to pay him like a worker, instead of the Mishnah. So when the Brisa clarifies, says what type of worker? Kapil bottle, like an idle worker. Meaning, it sounds like that. How much would a person want to take and do no work? Working, you get paid a lot, but you work hard. How much would a person want to take and do nothing? That's how much you pay this worker. Says my kapil bottle. What does it mean, like an idle worker? The guy's not sitting and doing nothing. This guy's putting effort. He's bringing in and transporting produce to the store, and he's selling, and he's taking the money, and he's measuring the payers. How could you say that that's how much you pay him to offset the service that he's providing? There shouldn't be ribbis, but he's not a poil bottle. Says the Gemara, Getindim and Beis. No, Amar Baya says, "Kapoil bottle shaloisa malocha de bottle me." No, we mean to say like an idle worker, meaning he's not idle. He's doing work, but he's idle from the work that he would have been doing. Meaning, if he's a carpenter or if he's a smith, how much would a person want to take to not do that heavy work and to do some type of easier work? So that's how much we're going to pay him. Of course, he's doing work, but many professional decide to give up their the urban the life and then move out to suburbia and then open up his own organic vineyard or whatever. So that's what I mean to say. That's how much we're going to pay him. Now, says the Gemara, Tzricha. We had to say all these different cases, which really essentially they're all the same principle, to explain this concept of paying to offset. Because the Itana Chemini, had we only said the first case of the storekeeper, I would tell you, Chemini who decided like a poil bottle. When you're paying him like an idle worker, why are you paying like an idle worker? You're not paying him exactly for the whole service. You're just meaning when he's not doing his regular day job, but you're still not paying him for the amount of work that he's doing. I would say, that's enough, because the storekeeper doesn't really do so much work. So whatever you would pay him to not do his heavy job, but just do an easy job, that's enough of a payment. But the second case of the Mishnah, when you're giving mois likach ben peres, when you're giving money to a guy, say, hey, buy produce, we'll split the profits. The guy's putting a lot of effort. Not like a storekeeper just having another thing on his shelves. I would say it's not enough just to pay him like an idle worker, meaning, again, not like a guy who's doing nothing, but he's not working his harder job. I would say that wouldn't be sufficient. So therefore, you have to say that it is enough. Meitana, had we only said the second case of mois likach ben peres, when you give a guy money to buy produce, that you pay him like an idle worker. Again, a guy who's not doing his regular heavy job. I would have said, hasmu debayi kapoil bottle. There is where you need to pay him at least like a guy who's not doing his hard job, but he's still doing a lighter job. Because this guy's doing a lot of work. A guy's buying the produce, then he's selling it. And that's where you say, to offset it, you need to pay him that amount. But a storekeeper would it's not so hard. Saying he's just adding another item to his shelves. I would say it's enough, just whatever minute amount, whatever token amount, that even he just dipped with him in brine, meaning like just a little. Only ate with him one dried fig. That you would say that's enough of the wages. We had to say both, to say that no, either extreme, you don't need more, you don't need less, and that's a chiddush by both these cases, to say that okay, that's how much you got to pay him to offset the service that he's doing. Now, kama ize v'tanagol ma'alim, how much goats and chickens are assessed, is a simon. These are just mnemonics for the brises we're going to bring in that continue on this theme of that you have to pay this guy that's doing the work for you to offset the problem about ribbis. That how much is that amount? Well, how much is the wages you have to give to this guy who's doing the service for you that it shouldn't be a problem about ribbis? So the first Tana says, it says whether a lot, whether a little, it doesn't make a difference. Whatever it is enough. Ridami says, he says, even if you didn't dip with him, but just one time in brine, you just ate with him one dried fig, that's his wages, as Rashi points out, that he's more lenient than Remeir. Your mayor, although he said whether a lot or little, it requires that you have to set some wages. Got to be something. However, whatever he's willing to receive for his wages is okay. Yehuda doesn't even require to set a wage. You could just dip with him and brine like a guy in the street. You just eat a chip with him. That's enough already. So he's more makel. Shimon Yechoy, he says, no, you got to pay him the full wages, meaning, where Rashi explains, it just doesn't mean the full wage. It means like a poil bottle, meaning like a guy who's not doing his hard work, but doing an easier job, meaning he's the more stringent, as we had said, the Brisa previously explaining the halacha of our Mishnah. But I'm going to learn the Brisa. Ain't shaman, we don't assess, not goats and not sheep, and neither anything that doesn't work but consumes. You cannot have an iska lemechza to split the profits in half. And the reason for that is because of the work that's being done, and there's nothing to offset that amount that the herdsman is working for. Because as Rashi explains, as we'll see later on, but if it's a type of animal that is oisav eichel, that does work and consumes, for example, a cow eats, but it also plows. A donkey carries loads. So that service that the animal does is the payment for the work and the food that the herdsman has to invest into the animal. So besides that, they're going to split the profits. This work that he's doing with the animal will offset. So you could do such a iska. That would not be a problem. But an animal that doesn't do any work, this guy's doing all the work taking care of the sheep and the goats, that's forbidden, again, because there's service that he's doing that's not being compensated for. He says, no, it's not a problem. It's not true. You could assess goats for iska. What do I mean? Goats produce milk. And sheep, you could also, because you could share the wool. Also, when they pass through the river, the water floods from the shearings off of them, and this worker could take it. When they pass through the thorns, some of the wool also gets stuck over there. And you could also go ahead and do this with chickens, with a hen, because it also, although it consumes, but it also produces eggs. Says the Gemara, but Tanakama. What does the Tanakama hold? No, Tanakama holds giza v'chalav, the shearings of the wool and the milk of the goats. Loisipek lischar amaloi umezainai. I mean, the Gemara asks as a question. Well, that's not enough for the payment for his work and for the food that he's investing for the animal? What do you mean? You think the shearings of the sheep and the milk of the goats is not enough to compensate him for the work and what he's feeding them? Says the Gemara, no, you're right. Regarding the shearings and the milk, you're right. No one would disagree that if the owner of the animal is agreeing not to split that of course that would be appropriate wages for the work that he's doing. Ki peligi, their home machlekes was binisyoivi, what's called whey, which is the water that's the waste of the milk, and v'toisrei, which is this what we call sheitefes and meiretes, which is because the word teisrei is the targum of noishrin, which is that they fall out this hair of the sheep when it walks through the water, or for when it walks through the thorns. That's the machlekes. Tanakama who held that these are not valid. That he says they have to pay a bona fide type of wage, which those are not schachim mishalom. They're not even kapoil bottle. That's not sufficient. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Yehuda, held like his father, which recorded Rabbi Yehuda before. That he says, no, even if you just dip with him, with some brine, you should eat with him one dried fig. That's already his wages. Okay, so then the milk and the whey and the hairs they get in the thorn, that's going to be enough. That's their machlekes. Another brisa. A woman could rent her hens to her friend b'shnei efreichen for the set price of 2 chicks for the year. Meaning, if a woman has a hen, she has a chicken, she's allowed to tell to her neighbor, Mrs. X, that has eggs, in the terminology of a rental, here, give me the eggs, I'll have my hen sit on them, and I'll put in the effort in these chicks, and then, from all the chicks that come, I'll take 2 chicks as my wages. That's permitted to be done. But if a woman tells her friend, look, the chicken is mine, and the eggs are yours. Okay, me and you, let's split the chicks. So here the terminology is not a rental terminology. It's a terminology of a chalukah, of a splitting. Now we have a machlekes. Yehuda says it's permitted. Shimon says it's forbidden. Why? The reason why Shimon says it's forbidden because any terminology of chalukah is an iska. It's a business deal. Now, which means to say that it's okay. It's just as much of a chance of a loss as it is a profit. We don't know what's going to happen with these chicks. Now, since the responsibility of half of the eggs are on the woman who owns the hen, comes out, and this is the whole principle of Iska we're going to keep on saying, comes out that half of it is a loan because she's responsible. So therefore, that's a problem. The work that she's doing is going to be ribis for the half of hers, that's the milva that she's responsible for. But when you say a terminology of I'll rent you my hen, so then the responsibility of the eggs is not on the owner of the hen. She's renting her hen and you pay me for price, the wages for 2 chicks. So therefore that's the critical difference in how you're phrasing this transaction. But then says the Gemara, but Rabbi Yehuda, what? Doesn't he require the wages of her work and her food? Meaning, we just explained Rabbi Shimon, which is simply like all the cases we said up until now that are a problem about ribis. How could Rabbi Yehuda say that it's permitted? Isn't this the classic, as all the classic cases, that you require a compensation to offset the work that she's doing? Because lashon chalukah, which is like a iska, which would be ribis. Says the Gemara, Ikka, there is beitim moizares, the unfertilized eggs that don't end up catching to become a chick. Those eggs, the woman of the hen takes as her wages, which Rashi and Teiz both point out that they're permitted to be eaten, because the Gemara says in Chulun Daf Samar Dalma Beis that these unfertilized eggs, that if you're not squeamish, then you could eat them. Now, this that Yehuda is the one saying that it's permitted. Well, why would Reb Shimon say then that it's usur? So because Yehuda goes according to his reasoning that he says that even just if you dip with them in brine, that's the wages. Reb Shimon goes according to his reasoning. It says no, you got to take a full wage. These unfertilized eggs are not good quality, and that's not so sufficient, and therefore that's their machlokes regarding the Beitz Mazaris, if that's going to be considered enough to offset the problem about ribs. Then I'm learning the brayso. Mokum shenogu lahalis schar kataf lemois lebehema, which is if someone assessed calves and colts that are small to split half the profits with his friend. So he gives him money for the wages that the worker has to carry the animal in and out on his shoulders because they're small animals. They need to be carried. So in the place where they generally do pay for that service, so Malin, you have to go and evaluate that. You cannot change from the custom of the country, because if you're not going to compensate him for carrying the animal, that service is going to be a problem about ribbis. Now, Shimon Gamliel, he says, no, Shoman Egel im imoy, meaning if there's a mother, you evaluate the calf with the mother, Bisyachim imoy, and the colt with the mother, meaning, as Rashi explains, there's no tircha to bring the animal in and out. Why? Because the animal is drawn after its mother, and without any extra effort or food, because the mother does work and consumes, and you don't have to pay this guy the wages for being a porter for carrying the small animal. And that's even when if you only evaluate just a young calf and a young colt, that generally when you do it individually, people pay for the carrying, but that's when it's alone. When it's with his mother, so the animal will go by itself, following after the mother. Says Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, doesn't he need the wages of the guy's work and what he feeds the animal? Meaning, as Taisa explains in the Masech Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, is that because that's what the Gemara is asking Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, because even if it's with his mother, many times you do have to pay for carrying the small animal on the shoulder. So that is what the Gemara is asking. Well, that's a service and not being compensated. How could he hold that you don't have to pay for the schar katav when it's with his mother? That says the Gemara, ikaglalim. There's the excrement, the animal dung, the fertilizer that has value, that the worker gets to keep that, so that will offset the ribbis. But the idach, the other one, the Tanakama who disagreed with Shimon Leil, he holds, no, that's not true. There's glalim, animal dung, afkudi mafkalu. People, it's ownerless, and it's not considered wages because it's not even his anymore. Anyone could use it, and therefore it doesn't agree to Shimon Leil that you don't need to pay him because it's glalim. No, you have to pay him to offset the service that the worker has to do to carry the small animal. Now, Amar Rav Nachman, he says halacha is Rabbi Yehuda, who we just had this machlekes before. How much do you have to pay the worker to offset the service that he's doing by selling or doing whatever work it is for the item that he took for this iska? The Yehuda held it's enough just to dip with him in brine. That was the smallest amount of compensation. So Rav Nachman halacha is like him. And halacha Rabbi Yehuda, that he said also that it's enough, this nisyobi, the way of the milk, and toitre, which are just the strands of hair that get stuck in the thorns and the water, that's also enough of a payment. And who he said, when the animal's with the mother, you don't have to pay. These are all the lower amounts that you don't have to pay him even when it's with the mother for carrying the small animal. Now, a story relating to this, which will actually clarify the halacha we just said, the Gemara brings the Bnei Rav Elish, the sons of Rav Elish, Nafak Alaya Hushtara. A document was produced against them that their father had accepted an iska, a business deal, which half of the profits and half of the loss. Now, this is what it said in it. It said Palga ba'agar or Palga b'hefsid. Half of the profit and half of the loss that he had taken merchandise from a person to sell, and the guy was showing that, hey, your father, passed away, but he did this for me. He owes me. I provide him merchandise and to sell. The problem with this was, Amar Rava, he says, Rav Elish Gava Rabhu. Rav Elish was a great person. He would not have fed something prohibited to a person. Meaning, he would not have given ribbis to the owner of the merchandise, because if it was that he accepted upon himself the way it's written in the document, that is ribbis. Why? Because as we've been explaining throughout this daf, when he did the work for the owner, half was a loan and half was a deposit. The half that he was doing for the deposit was because of the half that's a loan. That's ribbis on the milva. So obviously, you have to translate the document in a different way what the wording means to say. That actually, very unique, he was saying that he actually accepted on him either one. It wasn't both, it was either or, which is manavshach. Like basically what the owner was telling Rav Elish was whichever one you want. Palgam, if the so to speak the lender, if the one who gave you the merchandise was accepting, half was going to be ba'agar with the profits, then the lender is going to accept upon himself the responsibility of the loss more than half. For example, say tilsi behefsid, then he'll take 2/3 of the loss. Now there's no more ribbis, because that comes out if the owner is taking responsibility of 2/3 of the loss, so how much achrayis, which again is the concept that makes this into a milva, is Rav Elish taking? Only 1/3. Because he's only taking 1/3 responsibility. Yet, he's taking half of the profits. Oh, this that he's taking from the profits more than 1/3, that's the profits for the work that he put in, for all the effort that he was engaged in the 2/3 of the pakad. Great, that's offsetting it. Or, as we continue to Samach Testament Aleph, he had the other option. Ipalga behefsid, if he's going to take half of the losses, in other words, what was written in the shtar, that palga behefsid, meant that if Rabbi Elish wants to, he has a different option. He could take trei tilsi ba'agar. If he's going to take a bigger amount of the loss, well, then he'll be able to take a bigger amount of the profits, 2/3, and he'll only accept half the loss. Oh, that's the payment for his work. With this, that he's taking more of the profits than for his portion, which is half of it being a loan. So it's the same idea. It's just giving you more profit margin than loss. So that's offsetting it. So Amar of Khan says, I said over this teaching in front of Rav Zvid ben He said to me, but how do you know? How do you know that there's this unique way of interpreting that it was either or? Maybe the way he offset it was very simple. He dipped with him in brine. And Rabbi Yehuda, Allah is like Rabbi Yehuda, which says that that's all you need to do. Amalei says, no, lav hilchase itmar. It's not true. Rabbi Nachman didn't say halach is like Rabbi Yehuda. Elishita itmar. Rabbi Nachman just saying, and this is why this story was important for what we just said before, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yesi, his son, and Rabbi Shimon are all along the same theme, that they all say the minimum is what's necessary. The Gemara says, it's logical like this. Because the Ilay Tamach, you don't say this. Why is he saying halacha? To make him a cool, he's the most lenient of them all. You have to tell me the one with the hair getting stuck in the thorns, the one that he dips in the brine, you have to tell me the one that when it's with the mother, then he does. Just tell me the least of them all. Obviously, rather, like Tay says in the Masal Shita, the halacha is like Reb Shimon, who says you have to give schara mishalem. That was the problem with Rav Elish. So what's Rav Elish doing over here? How could he have half of the profits and half of the loss, which that's 50-50, and what's with the service that he's providing? Must have been, and that was his unique way of interpreting it, was either or. Either half the profits, and if it's half the profits, then he's taking only 1/3 of the loss, or half the loss, but then 2/3 of the profit, but you have to have that he was having more profits in his margin than of the loss, which that's offsetting the fact that he's doing a service, and then it's going to be permitted that type of iska. Thank you to any time for hosting us.